News special report. Here's Lester Holt.
Good day, everyone. We're coming on the air to bring you President Trump's remarks in the diplomatic room of the White House, where he is expected to announce momentarily that the United States will recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, a controversial decision reversing decades of U.S. policy. The decision, which fulfills a Trump campaign promise, has already triggered widespread concern and condemnation in the Arab world and among many U.S. allies, as well as from the Pope, along with warnings that it could further complicate the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We want to go first to NBC White House correspondent Hallie Jackson, who's been following all this. Hallie, while we wait for the president, describe the political calculation that the White House is using here.
There's a couple of those, Lester. Number one is the fulfillment of a campaign promise. You mentioned it. I have heard it in conversations with senior administration officials that this is something the president said he would do, and now he is following through on it. The other part is who this is aimed at, in part. Evangelicals, members of the president's pro-Israel base, essentially. That is who this is directed to. In addition, frankly, to the White House and officials that we speak with, believing that ultimately, in the long term, this could help peace talks. That said, the United States seems to be on an island with that perspective because of the widespread concern from around the world. Lester, in just about the last 2 minutes, I received an advance look at what the president is expected to say. And I can tell you that the president will say the United States remains deeply committed to helping facilitate a peace agreement that is acceptable to both sides. The president is also expected, according to this advance look at his remarks, to acknowledge how deeply divisive this is.
Hallie, thank you. And here is the president.
Thank you. When I came into office, I promised to look at the world's challenges with open eyes and very fresh thinking. We cannot solve our problems by making the same failed assumptions and repeating the same failed strategies of the past. Old challenges demand new approaches. My announcement today marks the beginning of a new approach to conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. In 1995, Congress adopted the Jerusalem Embassy Act, urging the federal government to relocate the American embassy to Jerusalem and to recognize that that city, and so importantly, is Israel's capital. This act passed Congress by an overwhelming bipartisan majority and was reaffirmed by a unanimous vote of the Senate only 6 months ago. Yet for over 20 years, every previous American president has exercised the law's waiver, refusing to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem or to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital city. Presidents issued these waivers under the belief that delaying the recognition of Jerusalem would advance the cause of peace. Some say they lacked courage, but they made their best judgments based on facts as they understood them at the time. Nevertheless, the record is in. After more than 2 decades of waivers, we are no closer to a lasting peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. It would be folly to assume that repeating the exact same formula would now produce a different or better result. Therefore, I have determined that it is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. While previous presidents have made this a major campaign promise, they failed to deliver. Today, I am delivering. I've judged this course of action to be in the best interests of the United States of America and the pursuit of peace between Israel and the Palestinians. This is a long overdue step to advance the peace process and to work towards a lasting agreement. Israel is a sovereign nation with the right, like every other sovereign nation, to determine its own capital. Acknowledging this is a fact is a necessary condition for achieving peace. It was 70 years ago that the United States, under President Truman, recognized the State of Israel. Ever since then, Israel has made its capital in the city of Jerusalem, the capital the Jewish people established in ancient times. Today, Jerusalem is the seat of the modern Israeli government. It is the home of the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, as well as the Israeli Supreme Court. It is the location of the official residence of the Prime Minister and the President. It is the headquarters of many government ministries. For decades, visiting American presidents, secretaries of state, and military leaders have met their Israeli counterparts in Jerusalem, as I did on my trip to Israel earlier this year. Jerusalem is not just the heart of three great religions, but it is now also the heart of one of the most successful democracies in the world. Over the past 7 decades, the Israeli people have built a country where Jews, Muslims, and Christians, and people of all faiths are free to live and worship according to their conscience and according to their beliefs. Jerusalem is today and must remain a place where Jews pray at the Western Wall, where Christians walk the stations of the cross, and where Muslims worship at Al-Aqsa Mosque. However, through all of these years, presidents representing the United States have declined to officially recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. In fact, we have declined to acknowledge any Israeli capital at all. But today we finally acknowledge the obvious, that Jerusalem is Israel's capital. This is nothing more or less than a recognition of reality. It is also the right thing to do. It's something that has to be done. That is why, consistent with the Jerusalem Embassy Act, I am also directing the State Department to begin preparation to move the American Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. This will immediately begin the process of hiring architects, engineers, and planners so that a new embassy, when completed, will be a magnificent tribute to peace. In making these announcements, I also want to make one point very clear. This decision is not intended in any way to reflect a departure from our strong commitment to facilitate a lasting peace agreement. We want an agreement that is a great deal for the Israelis and a great deal for the Palestinians. We are not taking a position of any final status issues, including the specific boundaries of the Israeli sovereignty in Jerusalem or the resolution of contested borders. Those questions are up to the parties involved. The United States remains deeply committed to helping facilitate a peace agreement that is acceptable to both sides. I intend to do everything in my power to help forge such an agreement. Without question, Jerusalem is one of the most sensitive issues in those talks. The United States would support a two-state solution if agreed to by both sides. In the meantime, I call on all parties to maintain the status quo at Jerusalem's holy sites, including the Temple Mount, also known as Haram al-Sharif. Above all, our greatest hope is for peace, the universal yearning in every human soul. With today's action, I reaffirm my administration's longstanding commitment to a future of peace and security for the region. There will, of course, be disagreement and dissent regarding this announcement. But we are confident that ultimately, as we work through these disagreements, we will arrive at a peace and a place far greater in understanding and cooperation. This sacred city should call forth the best in humanity, lifting our sights to what it is possible, not pulling us back and down to the old fights that have become so totally predictable. Peace is never beyond the grasp of those willing to reach it. So today we call for calm, for moderation, and for the voices of tolerance to prevail over the purveyors of hate. Our children should inherit our love, not our conflicts. I repeat the message I delivered at the historic and extraordinary summit in Saudi Arabia earlier this year. The Middle East is a region rich with culture, spirit, and history. Its people are brilliant, proud, and diverse, vibrant, and strong. But the incredible future awaiting this region is held at bay by bloodshed, ignorance, and terror. Vice President Pence will travel to the region in the coming days to reaffirm our commitment to work with partners throughout the Middle East to defeat radicalism that threatens the hopes and dreams of future generations. It is time for the many who desire peace to expel the extremists from their midst. It is time for all civilized nations and people to respond to disagreement with reasoned debate, not violence. And it is time for young and moderate voices all across the Middle East to claim for themselves a bright and beautiful future. So today, let us rededicate ourselves to a path of mutual understanding and respect. Let us rethink old assumptions and open our hearts and minds to possible and possibilities. And finally, I ask the leaders of the region, political and religious, Israeli and Palestinian, Jewish and Christian and Muslim, to join us in the noble quest for lasting peace. Thank you. God bless you. God bless Israel. God bless the Palestinians. And God bless the United States. Thank you very much. Thank you.
President Trump in the diplomatic room of the White House making those remarks and now signing the documents that will make it so that the United States government is now officially recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. It's a decision that's fraught with controversy, one that many think will open a dangerous can of worms in that part of the world. But nonetheless, the president fulfilling a campaign pledge. I want to bring in Andrea Mitchell right now, our chief foreign affairs correspondent. Andrea, he noted that previous presidents had made similar promises and didn't follow through. Why is that the case?
They didn't follow through because once they took office, Lester, they were advised by experts in the region, by diplomatic allies, as well as by their own national security advisors, that it was fraught with difficulty, could set off tensions, and would foreclose a final solution, a larger peace deal, because to resolve that crisis, the holy sites claimed by all three major religions are central to any final resolution. They are the most difficult decisions at the end of the road, dividing Jerusalem, settling who has better claim to something that has been debated for millennia. So the national security advisors and secretaries of state have all persuaded previous politicians, previous presidents, that it was unwise to go forward. That is where Donald Trump is different. He's a disruptor. and he's ignoring the advice, I've been told, of his Secretary of State and his Defense Secretary. Alerts have been made throughout the region by the Pentagon. Troops have been moved, and the State Department is advising all personnel to stay put and not go into Palestinian territory, Lester.
And besides Israel, who might be applauding this decision?
So far, no one. No one in the region, certainly. Not the Pope, not the NATO allies, not the EU, not the Arab League. We have not found anyone to endorse this other than some of his political supporters on Capitol Hill, in both parties, I should add. There's a lot of support for this by donors to evangelical Republicans, as well as, of course, to many Democrats in states around the country.
All right, Andrea, I'll ask you to stand by. We want to go to the region now. Our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, is in the West Bank city of Ramallah, just a few miles north of Jerusalem. I know it is a cold and blustery night there, but has there been any reaction on the streets?
We've been told a short while ago that there will be protests. They're hoping that there are going to be massive protests in Palestinian areas at noon tomorrow when it gets a little warmer, when the sun comes out. We're also expecting in a short time to hear the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas give a nationwide address, a response to what President Trump just said. In Israel, they are already celebrating. They are shining the American flag, an image of the American flag, on Jaffa Gate in East Jerusalem. That is a part of Jerusalem that Palestinians claim is their own. It is part of what is disputed territory, part of what Israel says is essential to its undivided capital, the city of Jerusalem, a city now that President Trump has just said that he believes is the Israeli capital. One thing that Palestinians are going to be asking, there's going to be a lot of questions raised by this. There will be anger, but also questions. What did the president not rule out? He seemed to be leaving open the possibility that maybe the Palestinians could also claim Jerusalem as their capital. Both sides do dispute it. So I think while it's going to create anger, there's going to be certainly a backlash on the streets here tomorrow, and perhaps in other cities as well. There will also be questions. What exactly did President Trump ruled out? We know what he gave to Israel, but by giving to Israel, did he take away from the Palestinians? It seems like he did, but people here will be wanting to know.
Richard Engel in Ramallah tonight. Richard, thank you very much. I want to bring in Chuck Todd now, the moderator of Meet the Press, our political director. Chuck, weigh in on this. The president moving forward, fulfilling a campaign pledge when as we noted, other presidents who had made the same pledge looked at the reality of the situation and backed away.
Look, he did this. This was a domestic political decision that he made that has international consequences and national security consequences. Andrea touched on this, but this is extraordinarily important for the president's evangelical base. And right now, he has deep support among a small group, a shrinking group of Republicans. Evangelicals make up a huge portion of that. So this is a big gift to them. But it is interesting to pick up on what Richard said and what Andrea said. It is clear everybody around the president didn't want him to do this. And so he at least accepted every watering down proposal that was put to him. So he said things like, that doesn't mean we know what the boundaries of Jerusalem will be, sort of hinting that maybe an East Jerusalem can be the capital in a future Palestine. He talked about having no preconceived notions of what borders look like and this or that. So it's clear he accepted all of the warnings that came from his folks, and he watered it down as long as he got to have the headline that said he's the president that is moving the embassy to Jerusalem. That's what he wants his folks to see as a headline. But let's do a little reality check here, Lester. To build in Jerusalem, by the way, it always takes even longer. There's always, you always have to worry about archaeological stuff and things like that. This could be a decade or more, not 3 or 4 years. This could take a decade or more before we actually see construction.
But he gets the immediate credit of making the
for.
announcement that the capital is now Jerusalem.
Exactly. That's what he's looking for. That's what matters to some major donors in the more conservative ranks of the Jewish community, but it means a lot, and this is where I think he cares the most about, to evangelicals. A message I bet you he brings when he campaigns in Alabama in a few days in that Senate race, where there's a whole bunch of evangelicals he wants to get to the polls.
All right, Chuck Todd, thank you for your analysis. We're also following another big story in Washington. It's the growing number of senators now calling for Minnesota Democrat Al Franken to resign from the Senate following mounting allegations of sexual harassment. Casey Hunt is on Capitol Hill with the latest on that. Casey, what seems to be turning the tide here?
Lester, at this hour, at least 15 Democratic senators, at least 10 of them women, calling on Al Franken to resign. There was another woman who came forward this morning saying that he touched her inappropriately or tried to, and this seems to have contributed to what was, I am told, a rising tide privately, especially among Democratic women here in the Senate. They were incredibly frustrated that they were being asked to make a distinction between what Franken has done and some of the other allegations that other public figures have had made against them. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand sort of taking the lead on this morning, and she was very frustrated when she spoke about it. She talked about trying to explain to her two sons what is the difference between inappropriate groping and all of these other allegations. And she said at this point, Democrats need to have a zero tolerance policy. So Senator Franken has tried to stay in the Senate, but he's going to make an announcement tomorrow, we're told, about his future.
All right, Casey, thanks. Let me bring back Chuck Todd on that. Chuck, Democrats a little slow now to gain this momentum. What's going on?
This is actually, I think, a response to what happened earlier in the Roy Moore Alabama Senate race when President Trump officially endorsed the Republican Party, the RNC, officially back in. This is about creating a huge contrast. So Democrats in the Senate, it almost feels orchestrated the way it's come out here. We'll see what Franken does tomorrow, but it looks like resignation is there. So they're cleaning house while the Republican Party looks like they're doubling down. And I think that's the contrast. You know, the Democrats are looking to get their higher ground back on this issue. Calling and having it being led by the women of the U.S. Senate allows them, I think, to build their high ground again after sort of frankly, fumbling the Conyers and Franken issues for the last 2 weeks.
All right, and then back to Hallie Jackson at the White House. The president all in now with more, correct?
Yeah. Formal endorsement earlier this week. It's not just the president, but after that happened, the Republican National Committee now pumping money back into that race, supporting Roy Moore in Alabama. Lester, you have that headline. You have the prospect looming now of a potential government shutdown, something that the president will be talking about with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, along with Republican leadership at the White House tomorrow. And all of it, Lester, on the heels of today's announcement, one of the most controversial and consequential foreign policy moves of his administration yet.
A busy day. You've got a lot ahead of you. Thank you, Hallie, and the rest of our team will, of course, be following all of this throughout the day. I'll be back with complete details tonight on NBC Nightly News. For now, I'm Lester Holt, NBC News, New York. Good day, everyone.